It's a happy day and a sad day. It's a sad day because the fifth show that Jim has had here will be his last. But it's a happy day seeing so many of you and also being surrounded by so many wonderful pots. Jim, you began as a painter.
Well, I didn't.
I need to tell you that he didn't begin as a painter. What did he begin as?
Well, I went to do a foundation course at Cumbria in South London, and I imagined that I was going to become a painter. We were required to do something three-dimensional, and I opted to do sculpture because I thought I was going to be a, in inverted commas, fine artist. So then I spent the next 6 weeks making a plaster mould of a milk bottle. And in the end, I thought, this is just a waste of time, you know. So I went back to the head of foundation and said, look, I'm not prepared to do this anymore. It's a waste of time. And he said, well, why don't you have a crack at pottery then? I started doing 1 day a week pottery at Camberwell. And that's where I met Ian Godfrey. And then, of course, I read Bernard Leach's A Potter's Book, the first chapter, which is called Towards a Standard. And I actually found that I agreed with everything that he said. And then, of course, Ian took us as a group to the V&A to see all those old Korean and Chinese pots. And I didn't know anything about Song Dynasty pottery or Korean pottery or who Bernard Leach was or Hamada. And I thought, well, you know, there's something here that I've been missing, you know, and that was it. I thought it's time I got into this. So that's how I became a potter.
And you went to Winchcombe for a while?
A short period at Winchcombe, yes. With Ray Finch, yeah. Yes, it was a really valuable thing to do for somebody who come out of art college, you know, because I was introduced then to the practicalities of running a workshop and making a range of standard ware. And he was a wonderful man, Ray Finch, a real gentleman. Yeah, but one of my jobs was to pack the kiln, and I was packing a biscuit kiln one day, and Ray had made these very tall cider jars, which are exhibition pieces, really, which I think he coiled and threw them. And I picked one up by the neck and the base, and was just placing it in the kiln, and the neck snapped off. So I had to go and tell him that I'd done this. And I remember he was throwing plant pots at the time, and I was shaking like a leaf, you know. And well, yes, I should tell you, when I went there, I went by train, and he picked me up from Moreton in Marsh railway station, and he was trying to talk to me on the way back to the pottery, but I was so in awe of him that I couldn't speak. I just froze solid. And now I had to go and tell him that I'd broken one of his exhibition cider jars. And he just looked at me and he smiled and he said, well, I must have had a crack in it, Jim. And that was the end of the matter. Yeah, lovely man.
And was it after that that you started on your own?
Yeah, yes.
And tell us about what that was like, setting up on your own.
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, in those days, there were lots of craft shops that sold work all over the country. And the first thing I did was pack up some samples and take them round to show people. And usually people were very rude. I remember taking some work to this gallery in Manchester, and I unpacked a couple of pots, and the guy that owned the gallery said, come with me. Oh, he stopped there, and come with me, I want to show you something. And he took me downstairs, and he had an exhibition space upstairs and kind of stock downstairs. And he said, and there were pots there by John Leach and Richard Battram and that gentleman over there, Sven Bayer. And he said, I brought you down here because I want you to see the kind of standard that we deal with here. He said, the door's over there. So I went along, to cut a long story a bit shorter. Later on, I went to David Cantor, who was honorary secretary of the Crafts Potters Association. And I showed him some pots and he liked them. He said, are you a member of this place? Which was the CPA. And I said, no, I'm not. He said, well, you are now. And I never went through the selection procedure. And then he said, have you had any exhibitions yet? And I said, no. He said, would you like one? So I said, yes. And he ran, I don't know if some of you may have heard of Crank's restaurants. He had a chain of them. And the way it worked was each restaurant had a craftwork gallery attached to it. And all the pottery in the restaurant was made at Winchcombe. It was all Winchcombe standard ware. And the idea was that you went in and had coffee, something to eat, and then you wandered into the gallery next door. Now you'd handled some handmade pots that, made you want to go and buy some. Oh yes, another really nice man, Colin Pearson. I went down for the opening of that exhibition. Nobody knew who I was. And there were a lot of people in there milling around, but nothing was happening. No red dots were appearing anywhere. And Colin, who was there, went up to the most expensive piece in the exhibition and said in a very loud voice, fantastic show, Jim, I'll have this one. And the red dots started appearing everywhere. So anyway, this show, David Cantor put a full-page ad in Ceramic Review, and it said something like, I don't know, first major exhibition by this exciting new talent, excuse me, but that's what it said. And a week or two later, I got a letter from this gallery in Manchester, and it said, Dear Jim, we'd love to have some of your work in the gallery. We've admired it for ages.
We were both lucky enough to become friends with the remarkable Bill Ismay. And he collected pots, and he had, for instance, he had a row of copers like I've never seen before. There must have been 20 odd in a row. In his 3,000 odd pots in the house, he had more Malone pots than anyone else.
I sold my first pot to Bill Ismay at my degree show at Camberwell. And Bill used to go around and visit all the degree shows to see if he could find anyone whose pots he might want to buy at some point. And he bought this pot. I knew about Bill Ismay, I'd heard about him, I'd seen photographs of pots in books with a caption, in the collection of W.A. Ismay. But I didn't know what he looked like, I didn't know him. So this funny little guy with a beret came on and bought a pot of mine. And it was clear that I didn't know who he was. So he wrote a check out. Do you remember those things? And he gave it to me like this, as if to say, you really should have known who I was, And that was the first pot that I sold to Bill Ismay. And in a strange way, the circle was closed at the other end because the last pot he bought before he died was one of mine. And he was at a gallery called the Oakwood Gallery in Nottinghamshire. And he came to choose his pot. We allowed him to come in because we knew he was ill, he'd got cancer. And he came in a couple of days before the show opened. And he sat down in a chair like that and he pointed at the pots he wanted to handle, and I would take them over to him and he'd have a look. And he bought a bottle with some Hakame on it. And but sadly he never got to collect it because he died before the show was over. But in a way that kind of, for me, completed the circle.
Who were the potters, Jim, you were most interested, the previous generation, the ones that maybe you really rated when you were, and perhaps influenced you?
Well, I think obviously Bernard Leach and Michael Cardew, but I think for me, the potter whose work I love more than anybody else's is Bill Marshall. Somebody wanted to write a book. They approached him because they wanted to write a book on him, and he wouldn't let them. He said the pots have to speak for themselves, you know. You know, he was incredibly modest. And when I went down to visit him, he showed me the kiln, and I was a bit surprised because he'd got an electric kiln in the corner, and he used that for biscuit firing. And for all those 30 years probably, I used to biscuit fire in my climbing kiln. And it was an act of masochism, but I didn't have the sense, you know, to buy an electric kiln to do that job for me. And I never said anything to him, but it must have been the way I was looking at it, because he just turned to me and he said, "I don't believe in unnecessary suffering, boy." You know? So I went out and bought an electric kiln.
Do you want to talk to us about how you see the potting world now and maybe the future of it? Because it does feel like it's on the cusp of a serious change.
Well, we're coming to the end of an era, that's for sure. I think the kind of pots that people like me have made, I mean, that will end shortly. There are one or two people, younger potters, coming through, but the problem is, apart from what Lisa's doing at Clay College, they've shut all the pottery courses in the art schools. Now, I don't know why they've done that. I mean, why pick on pottery courses? Why didn't they shut the textiles courses or the painting courses? Why did they do it? I don't understand. But now we've got a situation where, you know, all this information and knowledge that people like me and Sven and Mike and Lisa have gathered over, 40, 50 years now, and we can't pass it on, you know, because the channel isn't there to do it. When you're teaching, it's not just facility that you're teaching. No, you're teaching, you know, why is that pot a good pot and that pot's indifferent, you know? What's making that pot sing, you know? You can, if that's not there, if nobody's teaching that anymore, then, you know, nobody's going to make good pots anymore, are they? Because they don't know what a good pot is, really. So it's very sad.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Has anyone got anything that they would like to ask this man?
Yeah.
I seem to remember that you said once that Hamid has said to you that you could always tell who'd made a pot by looking at the base of it, how the base was finished.
Well, not Hamid particularly, but yeah, they do say that collectors in Japan can identify, because they don't sign the work. I mean, they put it in a box and they sign the box. Yeah. But, well, you can tell, I mean, you could show me a Richard Battram bowl and I could tell you they're not signed, and I could tell you that's a Richard Battram bowl, you know, not just from the turning, but just because it's so identifiable with Richard, you know. Yeah, I mean, I always sign my pots, and when people have asked me why, you know, why do you sign your pots, and my answer to that is, well, by signing it, I'm taking responsibility for it. Yeah.
I know. Why? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about the sort of Japanese aesthetic in ceramics, and sort of Japanese South Korean. Because I mean, it strikes me that your work is influenced in that way.
Yeah, it's been, yes.
Yeah.
It's simply that they're some of the best pots that have ever been made, you know. So as a potter, you're bound to be influenced by them. But I've been influenced by other things as well, less directly than that. I mean, you know, Bernard Leach used to say, when you're throwing a pot, even though it's a three-dimensional thing and it's going round, I mean, what you're actually doing with your hands is you're drawing a line in space, aren't you? And he used to say that it's important to pay attention to the beginnings and the ends of lines. And if you do that, what's happening in the middle isn't really that crucial, you know? And I'm going to make an analogy now, which I've probably got no rights to make, but I used to play a bit of jazz guitar. And when you're improvising over a chord sequence, it's very important how you start that off, because you've got to state, you know, what this chord sequence is or what it's about. And it's also important how you finish it. Those notes are important. I mean, what happens in between isn't really that important in the same way. And Miles Davis always used to say, if you play a wrong note, what really matters after that is the note you play after it. Yeah, oh, I love that one, yes.
I'm really alarmed at your comments that potting is disappearing, an alarming period, and I just wonder if you have any thoughts about how we might respond to that.
What Mike was saying earlier, I mean, if this is the end of an era, no matter what we're talking about, pots or anything else, a new era will begin. It'll be different, you know. And all I'm saying is that I think the kind of pots that people like me make, I mean, that's coming to a close. Because the information's not been passed on.
What is wonderful, though, is that you have, like the other potters that we work with, during a long career, made a huge number of pots. And most of those pots survive, and we can enjoy them, and we can own them and look after them and use them and get pleasure from them for many years to come. And we thank you for that. Yeah, it's very special. Jim, thank you.